Hello everyone, this presentation is to give you a quick background on forests and get you thinking about why forests change, how forests change, and what factors make a forest healthy or unhealthy. To start us off, I'm going to show you a couple pictures of forests and want you to look at the picture and determine whether or not the forest is healthy or not. And I want you to jot down a few of your observations, and you can pause the video if you need more time. And there's not really a right or wrong answer for this. So what I observe is that the front half of the picture, it looks like there's a lot of clear cutting. There's been a clear cut and there are new trees starting to come back. And then there's a big patch that hasn't been cut yet, and they're all the same species, it looks like, and the same age, and are really densely crowded in there. So I would say if this forest had a disease outbreak or fire, it would not hold up well because of the overcrowding and there's not much diversity. However, if you were harvesting timber, this would be a pretty straightforward way to get a lot of good timber. Here is the second picture. You can pause for more time. And what I observe are there are a lot of dead trees that probably died to an insect outbreak. However, not all the trees are dead. There are some small conifer or evergreen trees that are still alive. I'm not really sure if they are about to die because they're infected or if they've survived and are going to continue on living. So that's somewhat unsure. But there are still some aspen trees that are alive. So this is kind of a complicated answer of yes, there's a lot of death, but we're not really sure if this forest is recovering and hanging on or if it's continuing to go downhill. Here is the third picture. And what I observe is it looks kind of like a meadow. There's a lot of old trees, but not that many young trees. And you'll also notice that there's a pole in the middle of the picture, which is probably fencing to keep out elk. Elk are notorious for over-browsing and eating younger trees and keeping those younger trees from growing and replacing the old ones. And so what a manager has done is they fenced off the back half of this picture to allow those younger trees to keep on growing to create some age diversity in the forest and get new trees established. So without this fence, this picture would probably be an unhealthy forest because we can't regenerate new trees. Here is the fourth picture, and it is a more simple answer. There has been a really devastating, strong wildfire that killed everything. And so this forest will take a very long time to recover, if at all recover to what it used to look like. When we're trying to determine if a forest is healthy or not, it's helpful to look at a number of different questions. And so the first is the forest resilient to change? Will it be able to handle disease outbreak or wildfire and not have a devastating die-off? The other is it providing ecosystem services, which I will cover more in the next slide? And does it fulfill our values? Is it a good place to hike or to fish? Is it protecting our water quality or providing timber? Because we manage forests to address certain human values. Forests are really important ecosystems because they provide a lot of services. So I will list a few, but there are more services. The first of which is flood mitigation. So they hold back water, keeping it from rushing down the mountain all at once. They have a lot of forage and provide habitat for animals and support both plant and animal biodiversity. Forests sequester a lot of carbon, so they take carbon dioxide from the air and either store it in the soil, use it as energy, or use it for new growth. They shade the water to keep it cold, which supports more aquatic life, and they also keep the snow from melting so rapidly. They'll filter the water, so making sure it's nice and clean. Forests also provide lumber and firewood, or if you've ever gotten a Christmas tree from the forest. And forests also provide tourism and recreation. So hiking, fishing, camping, all those things are services that forests provide. We have a lot of forested land cover in Colorado. About a quarter, 18%, is forested, which is pretty similar to the United States as a whole, which is just slightly less forest cover. And I wanted to show you this map because the countries in green are countries that are increasing their forest cover, and the countries in red are losing forests due to urbanization and cutting of forests. And unfortunately, most of the countries in red are poorer, are developing countries, and unfortunately they have depending more on their forests to provide that economic boost, whereas richer countries don't, and so their forests are growing. Colorado forests are especially important when it comes to water quality and water quality for states downstream. Colorado is nicknamed the headwaters state because we have many rivers that start in our mountains that 18 different states depend on. And because of our forests are protecting that water quality, we are providing better water quality for those downstream states. Here in the San Luis Valley, our forests also provide that same role of keeping our water quality good and clean. And in this picture, the blue are where moisture, snow, and rain is the highest, and red is where it's the lowest. And you'll notice where all our snow and rain falls, where most of it falls, is where it is forested. And here's a picture just to show you that forest cover, and it is pretty evenly lines up where all that moisture is falling. So that forest is really important for water quality, and our Rio Grande National Forest was established for the very reason of protecting our water quality. If you've ever gone hiking in the mountains around here, you've noticed that trees will change as you hike up to higher elevations, and we call this a elevation gradient. So the higher we go, we typically get more moisture. However, the growing season is shorter because it gets cold more often. And so tree species only grow where they are best adapted. And when we start at the bottom of the valley, there's not really many trees unless we're next to a river. It's mainly grasses and shrubs, but if you keep hiking into the foothills, you'll run into the pinyon juniper forest, those scraggly, twisted trees. And if you keep hiking, then we'll get into taller trees with ponderosa pine, Douglas fir. Keep hiking above 9,000 feet, you'll enter the spruce fir forest, so those giant Engelmann spruce subalpine fir trees. And if you keep hiking, eventually you'll reach the tree line where trees can't really make it anymore. The growing season's too short, and it's mainly short grasses and some moss that survive. Here's a breakdown of those different forest types in Colorado. So pinyon juniper is the most abundant community, and it looks like spruce fir is right behind it. And in the SLV, we also have a lot of riparian tree communities, which means next to a river. So all those cottonwood trees are part of the riparian communities. To understand forest health, you have to have a good understanding of how trees function. Trees photosynthesize, they are taking in carbon dioxide, creating sugars, sending it to the rest of the tree, and they're also drawing up water from the ground and transpiring it through their leaves. And we can see where all these functions are in the trunk of the tree. In the middle, we have the heartwood, which provides strength and structure. If you go one layer out, that's the xylem. And I remember X means dead tissue, so it's dead tissue that's drawing up water and minerals from the ground. One layer out, we get the cambium, and that is where the new cells are growing. It will create that new ring in the tree trunk. Then one layer out, right underneath the bark, we have the phloem. That's the living tissue that's transporting sugars from the leaves to all the cells to either use as energy or to create new growth. We have a number of different threats to our forest here in Colorado. A big one is insect and disease outbreak. We have a lot of beetle kill. We have threats to our watershed and the loss of that ability to protect our water quality. And we're also having more wildfires, stronger and hotter forest fires, and some encroachment of humans, so more cabins being built in the forest and cutting down to create larger towns. Pine beetles, beetle kill has been one of the more pronounced threats to the upper Rio Grande watershed, with a lot of die-off. And it's been fairly recent, starting in the early 2000s. We had the mountain pine beetle outbreak grow, and then later the spruce beetle outbreak grow. And there have been things that we have tried to do to slow this, but mainly we just have to wait until this runs its course. And how they kill a tree, if you think back to that cross section of the trunk I showed you, right underneath the bark where the beetles burrow into, they're eating that phloem where all that sugar is, and they'll eventually cut the circulation of a tree and kill it. And if they don't cut the circulation of the tree, they'll weaken it and make it more susceptible to other diseases. When it comes to pest management, there's different categories of methods that we and forest managers use to control them. And I'm not going to go too into depth here, but if you want to pause and really read this, you can. But basically, there are chemical defenses with like pesticides, or more biological by introducing other predators or placing pheromone packets on trees. And there's also regulatory methods, so making sure that the outbreak doesn't spread so fast by putting restrictions on where you can carry firewood and preventing movement of logs across forested areas. We have also seen an increase in forest fires and an increase in their intensity and the destruction they cause. And for a long time, we have, as humans, suppressed forest fires because we didn't want them to happen. But forests are used to having regular intervals of fire, and we call that their natural fire interval. So for our pinyon juniper forests, they are used to having a fire every 200 to 400 years. Ponderosa pine is more adapted to fire, and they are used to having fires every 5 to 25 years. And the subalpine communities are used to having fires every 50 to 300 years. So there is a natural fire interval, and so we as humans have kind of tried to mimic that and had more controlled fires so that when there is a natural fire, it is less severe. But with more drought and more beetle kill and climate change, we are seeing more destructive fires. There are three main factors that control the intensity of forest fires. The first is climate, so drought is a big driver of hotter fires and faster spreading fires. Then also vegetation, so if there's a lot of smaller vegetation and a lot of dead trees on the ground, those create what we call fuel ladders. So the little things catch on fire, then the medium things catch on fire, and then they spread to the bigger trees. But if there's less of that smaller stuff, then the fire can't spread up to the bigger canopy as fast. And topography. Fire can spread up to 4 times faster up steep slopes. So when we have big steep ravines and the fire starts at the bottom of it, they can really spread quickly uphill. So safety tip is you never want to be above a fire, you want to be below the fire because the fire can really rapidly spread uphill. The last thing I wanted to cover today is management practices, which is a huge part of forestry because we as humans play a big role in forests and actively protecting and managing them. And so we have best management practices that control and minimize wildfire risk, minimize beetle kill, and provide services for us. So here are a few methods that we can put into place to minimize wildfire risk. And thinning one is a big one. Fire breaks, so creating clear-cut strips that will prevent the fire from jumping from one section of forest to the other. Trails are a pretty clever way of putting in fire breaks. And reduction of fuel, so prescribed burn will kind of cut down on the amount of fuel. And prescribed burns also enhance wildlife and protect native plants that are an important part of the ecosystem. And if you want to learn more, search best management practices of forests, and there is a lot to learn about how we manage forests. I hope this was a good launching point for you in understanding the basics of forest, and I hope you continue to learn about forestry. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you would like more on forests, we have our activity page. I will link in the address if you haven't found it already. And I particularly want to point out the Forest Health Index, which is Colorado specific, and you can look at forest health data for your particular watershed and sub-watershed, so San Luis watershed, or Upper Rio Grande, or Sawatch Creek. And it's a really great way to dive in and explore the data. So I hope you check out our other resources, and thank you again for watching.